as I was saying, for those of you who are guests, please join us or check us out at www.stirlingfriends.org and see all of the wonderful things that we do. And we hope that you will decide to join us. You should all be getting your emails, and you should all be getting your calendars and read them to know what's going on. The only thing I want to bring to your attention, one thing is this Sunday at the library, we are having Batya Cohn, who is a wonderful facilitator in her art, and she is going to be with us in person. And the program, she will start at 3 o'clock on Sunday. We're having a pizza party first, so we will feed you. You will be very, you will be well fed, and then you will be well informed and entertained. She's marvelous, and do yourself a favor and join us Sunday if you can. And somehow down the line, we hope to get Shelly into the library again. No, Shelly's never been there.
Right, for the first time.
So we're looking to have Shelly come in, hopefully March, April-ish, and that will be exciting as well. But tonight we are lucky to have Shelly on Zoom with us and taking us back to two people French, but it's like so different because Driving Madeline was two people from France, and this is two people in France, but wow, very different and another wonderful movie. So everybody, please mute yourself. You will unmute when you have comments and questions at the end. But at this point, mute. And Shelly, thank you for being with us. We love having you here, and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. And likewise, I love being here. So it's welcome, everybody. It's nice to see you. Jackie did put something in the chat, which she and I had been discussing, and what she wanted to do, and I applaud her for doing this too. These are the films that I mentioned at our last meeting that the director of Driving Madeline wrote and directed these films. So if you have a chance, they're definitely worth seeing. And one of them is also mentioned is Welcome to the Sticks with Danny Boone, which is a riotous comedy. So you can have fun with that too. Okay. Going from the sublime to the sublimer. The two of us, written and directed by Claude Berry, is from 1967. And as the theme is, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see the theme of these next few months, it's world cinema then and now and then. We start off with a contemporary film, and then the second week we do a classic, as you'll see, and that'll be coming up. But anyway, Claude Berry was a screenwriter director who did a number of films. He passed away, I think it was in 2009. He is best remembered for The Two of Us, the film you're seeing, that you've seen for tonight, but also he directed the classic Jean de Florette and Manon of the Spring, two great films, and two great classic films that are period pieces from the early 20th century, post-World War I. Anyway, originally called Le Vieil Homme et l'Enfant, or The Old Man and the Child, the movie centers on an 8-year-old Claude Langman, whose Parisian parents send him to live in the countryside with a retired Christian couple they've never met. Now, this is taking place during World War II. They feel he'll be safer there, a judgment made by many Jewish parents in wartime France. Claude arrives with a new last name, as we've seen, Longuet, and instructions to act as Catholic as he can, chanting the Lord's Prayer from time to time and hiding his little circumcised birdie, a giveaway for sure. The film is, psychologically, the film probes an unusual friendship between an old provincial bigot and a young Jewish boy, and it does so with unfailing sensitivity. In being an 8-year-old child in 1944 Paris, especially a Jewish one, can also be seen as one of the unstated themes of the movie, to the degree that even the most catastrophic political developments can leave personal lives, particularly the private lives of children, the private lives of children virtually untouched or touched in quite mysterious ways. But the movie is not really about danger and concealment. It's about how love grows between the boy and the old man, and how the boy who is already a Jew becomes a wiser one. The Two of Us is far more than a little gem from Berry's early career, though historically it was among the first French films to depict Nazi sympathizers with three-dimensional truth, neither whitewashing nor apologizing for their misguided ideas, but just who they are. Cinematically, it has a lightness of touch, a sureness of technique, and a seamless blending of lively humor and dead seriousness that even Berry has never surpassed. The movie is not so much an argument against anti-Semitism as a demonstration that feeds on ignorance. The old man has not given much thought to his prejudices, but caught them like a virus in his childhood, and has carried them along uncritically into old age, owing to the fact that growing up where he did, being where he was, he never really had much contact with Jews. He has no idea the child he's come to love so much is a Jew. And that's important, because I suspect if he did know, he would make an exception for little Claude while continuing to harbor his prejudice against theoretical Jews. He has the advantage of knowing nothing about something he knows nothing about. He's not converted in his thinking by this movie. And one of its strengths is that it ends without him ever becoming enlightened. He never becomes enlightened. Such a scene of discovery might be considered a sentimental irrelevance. To do that would make it Hollywood, because the movie is not concerned with what Pepe knows, but with who Pepe is, and revealing who he is. The person who learns and grows is Claude Berry, who was born in 1934 with the name Claude Berry Langman. It's his story. The same name little Claude has in the movie, Langman. That was his original name. And so it is fair to conclude the movie is the result of what the little boy learned during his stay among the Gentiles. He learned that anti-Semitism isn't evil, but he learned to forgive some of the Pepes of the world, for they know not what they do. For those who do know, forgiveness is another question, but that is another movie. That would be another movie. Claude plays his part well, building a warm relationship with Grandpa and Grandma, his elderly hosts. They think he's been sent to their farm because he was torn from Paris has grown so dangerous, it never crosses their mind that he might be a Jew. The rich irony at this film's heart is that Claude's protectors buy into the common prejudices of their time and place, anti-Semitism included. The way Grandpa sees it, the war that's turned this country inside out was caused by Jews, plus communists, Freemasons, and those shifty English, the worst of all. His hero is Marshal Pétain, the puppet ruling France under Germany's thumb. Grandpa keeps Petain's portrait on the wall even after the Allies start winning. This is my house, he declares. Here, I decide who rules France. In a second irony, though Grandpa also has humane and generous qualities, as we see, he's a vegetarian. The folks who gobble Grandma's rabbit stew are cannibals to him. And he adores his loyal dog, seating him at the dinner. I love those scenes, seating him at the dinner table and making sure the pooch's morning coffee has the right amount of milk. It's one of the unique qualities of the two of us and a sign of Barry's own humanity and his generosity that Grandpa is depicted not as evil, but as simply ignorant. To demand that he rise above his own errors, ingrained bigotry, the film gently tells us, would be to indulge a bias of our own, a bias of our own. It is interesting to think that at the beginning of the two of us, it's hard to predict what the movie's tone would be. You know, he's running around the apartment. They have to get him out. He steals the toy in the department store. All of these things can lead to dangerous places. The ingredients are there for it to become a tragic Holocaust drama. But Claude is such an animated and self-reliant child that it's natural to share his high-spirited optimism as he explores the new house he's in, the farmhouse, learning to tolerate and then to love Grandpa and Grandma. It becomes clear that Barry's escorting us along this emotional tightrope, delicately balanced between condemnation of Nazi hate and small-minded Christian chauvinism on one side, and an embrace of irrepressible life, empathy, and friendship on the other. Artistically speaking, this was a risky venture, especially back then in 1967 in the film. But Barry brings it off superbly, as in the scene where Claude, informed by Grandpa that Jews have big noses, points out that Grandpa's own is the opposite of petite, sending the old codger to a mirror for a moment of puzzled self-examination. I love it as Michelle Simon, who I'll talk about in a while, looks in the mirror. By any civilized standard, Grandpa's words would have been as detestable as the intolerance behind them. But Claude turns them mischievously back on the old bigot, knocking a hole in his prejudice without wounding or belittling him. Barry's kind-hearted portrayal of Grandpa and Grandma is even more remarkable, given the fact that the two of us was based on his own experience as a child. He had been sheltered during those years by gentile friends of his parents, not by people he didn't know. It's his voice, though, we hear saying, "I was 8 years old and already a Jew." Although the real events have been fictionalized for the sake of effective storytelling here, it's obvious that the film is grounded in Barry's ultimate forgiveness of his protector's all too human flaws. 9-year-old Alan Cohen, who stars in the film, was a pupil and a conspicuous cut-up, from what I've been reading, in Hebrew school, where Barry visited and found him. Cohen also had close ties to the story, since his mother had survived World War II as a child herself, after her parents were sent to Auschwitz. Cohen later recalled that although he was just a kid when he made the movie, he knew it was linked to painful and serious family events, and this defined his performance. Michelle Simon was one of France's most beloved actors. He had been acting since between 1910 and 1920. His career began. He had a long career in film and in the theater. And for his portrayal of Pepe in this film, he won the Best Actor at the Berlin Film Festival in 1967. It was, how ironic is that? But also the fact that it was a well-deserved award. It was a resurrection of his career at that time. He had fallen on hard times, and Barry just thought he would be perfect for the role, which he was. The music in the film has a deceptively, I like to think it's a deceptively simple score, which underlines the film's many moods along the way. And it was composed by one of France's greatest film composers, Georges Delarue. He had scored many, some might be familiar to you, French films. I don't think, Barry said in retrospect, years later, about the film, I don't think about what is more important. And this was his own philosophy. I don't think about what is more important, life or movies. In all my life, I am making only one movie, and that movie is my life. This statement applies to no film more vividly than the two of us. It's a profoundly human comedy that hasn't lost an ounce, from my estimation, and why I wanted you to see it, and it hasn't lost an ounce of its power, its liveliness, or even its enchantment. In a 1975 interview, Berry said that he was trying to illustrate Jean-Paul Sartre's description of anti-Semitism as someone who doesn't like tomatoes, but has never tried one, That does not make the racism any less odious, but it does make it more understandable. It does make it more understandable. And there you have, in a nutshell, my feelings about the film. There are many scenes I'm sure you would remember from it and if you want to talk about them. But I hope you will join the conversation. As I like to say, this program is not about film, it's conversation. So I invite you to join into the conversation. Who wants to go first? Wendy, jump right in there.
Okay, I loved the last scene where Claude is going back with his parents and grandma and grandpa, and they're all in tears. There was
Yeah.
so much love between all of them. And of course, he had to go back with his parents, but they were bereft. All of them were bereft. It was a brilliant scene.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it was. And the film really, shoots at the truth in such a crucial way. I mean, it just, we have to remember this is 1967. It's 22 years after the war, and they still have not, especially in Europe and France, have not really dealt with the Holocaust head on, in terms of their own being, in terms of France's being. And this was definitely an important film that points it out, Okay, Karen.
Well, I wanted to say that I really like the scene where the little boy is where Claude is listening to when he asks him how you can tell what a Jew is,
Yeah.
and he's telling him about they smell bad, and they've they have flat feet so that they can avoid the draft and things like that, and how he's like counteracting that as he goes on, and just making it sound unplausible if you think about it that way, but anyway, I just thought it was cute how he did that. And even when he was playing chess with the man's son, with Pepe's son, he was he was looking at Pepe, and he was looking at him, and the guy is missing all these jumps. So it was just how perceptive he was in everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's what we're seeing here. We're just seeing a perceptive young boy who, is realizing the situation he's in because his parents prepared him for it naturally.
Right.
And his reactions are wonderful, as are Michelle Simon's. Susan Pauls.
Hi. I disagreed about the ending. I wanted to see more of the process involved in bringing him back to his parents and how they got back together again, but they left it to me to invent, so I invented. One of the things that struck me as a metaphor in the film was the spoon feeding. When the boy was at home, his mother babied him, obviously, and treated him as if he couldn't even feed himself to show love. The father expected him to act like an adult and be responsible and not give them away by being a wild little kid. And he's kind of in the middle of that, enjoying the being spoon-fed and fighting against the parental restrictions on his life. When he moves to the farm, the farmer finds him to be a young man, somewhere in between. He does not spoon feed him, he spoon feeds the helpless dog.
Oh,
So the child is not seen as helpless, as the mother saw him, or as totally responsible, but as something to teach and help grow. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for the care.
yeah, oh, definitely. But I also see, you know, we also have to read into the irony of how he treats the dog, how he treats his own bigotry, his own, you know, his own anti-Semitism, you know, that he doesn't really understand. He's too ignorant to understand, but yet puts the dog at the table, puts the, you know, that believes more in the dog than, well, than the human race at that point.
Well,
But
the dog isn't Jewish.
yeah, exactly. But it's just the idea, you know, of how he's treating it. Absolutely, absolutely. I love the comment on, yes, that is a great metaphor. Thank you. Jackie.
Although I liked how the grandfather grew to love him, and so much of the grandfather, as is everyone's attitude, often is based in ignorance. When you really are honest about it. Frankly, I loved the relationship between the father and the actual son, because dad was tough on him. And yeah, dad kind of expected him to be adult. But what dad really was worried about is that they would be found out. So I don't
Yeah.
know that it was so much that he expected the little boy to be an adult. He was just terrified. He loved his son so much. I loved how he clung to him at the end when he was getting on the train. I thought that was great. And I didn't really need a lot of explanation at the end when they drive away and the grandfather's actual son has kind of left him because they can't agree. And the little boy who actually is who he thinks is part of who created the war, the Jews, they're devastated that the little boy is leaving. And I thought the actual cinematography was terrific in this. I would have liked to have seen it go a little bit somewhere, though. I began to, in the middle of it, begin to get a little tired of Grandpa dancing around in the fields and all that kind of stuff. But I thought the filming was very nice.
Yeah, well, this is, you know, we have to look back again. It's 1967, what we call the Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave, of these kinds of films which deal, you know, with character. It's really more about character than plot. And watching him, you know, also he was a beloved character that performed like this. He was in many ways, in fact, I was going to say in many ways, he was Chaplin-esque. And in fact, Chaplin considered him the greatest actor in the world, had named him the greatest actor in the world. And he, you know, demonstrates this. And that's why, you know, the filmmakers of the new French New Wave, Truffaut, Godard, for us, as an audience, you know, spoon-fed, you know, on Hollywood film, goes to look at films like this and sitting there in 1967 going, okay, where is this going? As opposed to look inside the film, look at the character, look how they behave, look how they react. And that's what's happening within this film. I mean, the cinematography is terrific, and I love the fact that it isn't black and white. I mean, that really, you know, pleased me to no end. I mean, I saw this film back in 1967 and loved it, but I love it even more today because it is a time capsule. It is a look back at film history, but also how some things haven't changed. Some things have changed. We just put them in different places, and it's interesting to me. But as you said, you know, staying within the frame, you know, yeah, I mean, the way it ends is not, you know, it's not Hollywood. It's leaving it up to us. just as Susan said, if you want me to think about what will happen, I will. You know, I'll figure it out. We'll all figure it out. He went on to become a great director. We know that. And that's what I think the ending is. The kid grew up. The kid learned something about himself, which he would incorporate into his life. This film is like The Persistence of Memory. It is a film he made dedicated to his own memory. So I thought that was terrific. Okay, thank you, Jackie. Marilyn.
I really enjoyed the movie. I thought that the script was great, but I really loved the acting. I thought the acting was wonderful, very, very well chosen as to who was playing which part. And my question is, the person who played Claude, Alec Holm, did he ever do anything else? Did he ever? I mean, he was so excellent. I adored it. It was delicious. And
Yes.
did he ever make another film? Did he?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he went on to act in other films.
They just
the-
chose him from the Hebrew class, and
Yeah.
he really didn't have any acting education.
No, none, but he was a cut up in school. He was a cut up in school. And he's you know, he in fact he didn't make many more yeah, he still acts. But he made several films with Claude Berry. He grew up in essence with Claude Berry. Used him in another film in 1997. So he's been around. He's a terrific little actor.
I love the interaction between Pepe and Claude, and I thought, you know, when you take, like, I didn't see growth in Pepe. He just was the same person he was. He was authentic. He was who he was. He was a product of the times of where he lived. I didn't see any growth in him, but I certainly did see Claude because he had his eyes wide open and he really took whatever he experienced in France, you know, on the farm into his life and did whatever he did. I mean, he saw that anti-Semitism was evil. And I think that this was his exposure to that. And without that experience, he would not have really seen this. And I'm sure he did something with it in his life. But
Yeah,
the actors were excellent.
yeah, they were, and you know, what you say about Pepe is true because again, it's another metaphor with the dog. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You know, and that was an old dog, and he was an old dog. So you know, it's as much as we'd like to see that kind of transformation. That's not what the story is about. The story is really truth in and of itself.
Even when Claude said to him, wasn't Jesus a Jew? And then he said to him, well, if Jesus was a Jew, does that make God a Jew? And it wasn't going anywhere. And it was way over Pepe's head and he just let it go. But you could hear the wheels turning in Claude, which was, you know, he's a very sharp little boy.
Yes, he was.
Which is when Barry saw himself as a sharp little boy.
Yeah. That's terrific. Okay, thank you, Marilyn. Sandra Lefkowitz.
I actually have a comment about the two films juxtaposed with each other. The first, Driving Madeline, and this film, and I thought both of them really, the value of the films for me was the complexity of relationships.
Thank you.
And that it not so much who grows, but how change is possible. And in Madeline, the taxi driver is the one who really grew because he was compelled by this fascinating woman who just she knew who she was, and she very much led him to a place that was better. And of course, she exits from the film. Whereas in this film, the two of us, the little boy is the one that seems to be the one who grows, but he came from a background of that, where he was very much who he was, the way Madeline was. And the value of the relationship was that it's not so much that Grandpa changed, which he didn't particularly, but that he grew in a way that was personal. And I think both the cab driver and the grandfather both grew differently, and I think in the case of the French, the film was, it was more reflective of the time that the boy was the one that was the driving force. But the cab driver and the boy shared much in common in their ability to work with a situation and develop character. I thought it was a great choice of combinations and of putting them together, and the way people function, and that we have a political nature, but somehow it's more the way that little boy was raised. He was a Jew, and he was only 8 years old, but he was very much presented as a Jew, and he was going to maintain that. It was just in him. And Madeline was going to maintain who she was. She was not changing. And she learned to be a little bit more flexible in her relationships. And so that's it.
Interesting observation. I will tell you, it's now you're bringing it up. Yes, I mean there is. Wait till next month if you want to see two films that do the same thing. But in this case, you can, there's a correlation between Claude and Charles. They're both children in the film. And I don't know if I would say that Pepe grew. I think what he did, though, might have been awakened in him was a love for this boy. We see in contrast, he's having a hard time with his son. He can't, and therefore now he finds in little Claude, he can play with him. It's a grandson. It's something that he can pour his love into, and without realizing that's why I say, had he found out he was a Jew, he might have, made a little dispensation for him. But again, both films are in a sense dealing with this persistence of memory. In one hand, we're dealing with Madeline's memory and how it functions to, affect Charles, whereas this whole film is a memory by Claude Berry that's being delivered to a new generation in France. To say, wake up, look at who we are. This was a country in denial. They didn't want to face it. The same way Germany wanted to clear the table after World War II and say, let's forget the past and move on. France, same way. We're not going to deal with this now. And, it wasn't until a few years later that they really did start to deal more with it. So I think that what Berry did was very brave. He was really dealing with the truth within the film, with the film. And especially because it's his own life that he's bearing on screen. So I thought that was terrific. But yeah, I do tend to agree with you in a lot of ways in terms of contrasting these two films. Thank you. Okay, who's next? I don't see many hands out there. Oy. Where's the conversation? Yes, Wendy.
There was one thing in this pastoral environment in France where they're walking in the town, and there's a sign, and it's a German sign. Achtung, if anyone kills a German, there will be 50 Parisians, French killed. That was a quick sign, but the entire environment for these French people were under great stress because the Germans were there, and if they were looking for Jews, no one would know. No one could find them, and they would be in great trouble.
Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, that part of France, but they did send a lot of kids out. In some cases, giving them hidden identities. We also know that many young kids were sent to convents with
Exactly.
hidden identities, or the convent hid them, knowing who they were. So it was a very serious situation. In this case, though, he's creating a human comedy. He's showing us a very human film, about people. Jackie?
Well, going to with what Wendy said, I agree, Wendy, that was very jarring, that sign was. And I think that what it did was it made you come back to what was underlying. It was the constant conflict, or what was different in the movie is that here they are running and dancing and singing and playing in the fields, and yet there was all of this going on underneath it, which is often what the case is. And the same thing with the relationship with the grandpa and his son, is that there was so much conflict there, and yet they're drinking wine and they're singing and things like that, but it's always there. And I thought that sign, I agree with you. I think that sign kind of jumped out and made you stop looking at it as a grandfather, grandson kind of thing, and more of what is really happening here.
Well, yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, that's that fine line that Barry is walking and saying, you know, yes, you know, you're seeing this idyllic little relationship, or this relationship where, you know, one person is in essence lying to the other. And then you see why he's lying to the other. You know, that's the jarring truth. That's a jarring truth in the film. You know, he doesn't have to bang us over the head. It just comes up, and then it's forcing us to think, just as you just said, the same way. Thank you.
Powerful.
Yes, Fern. Oh, no, Fern wants to come in. Never mind. Marilyn, did you have something else? And then Sandra Fuss. There you go.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
What I really didn't like about this is that you know, relating to what was said by Jackie and Wendy, I found that the undertone where you had the innocent Jewish boy, you had a lot of racism, you had a lot of bigotry, and you know, all Pepe was totally politically incorrect, but I found it was not it was not preachy. In other words, each person was who he was, and there was nothing preachy about it. It just was who it was, and I thought that was beautiful.
It's called you know, not being schematic, the film itself, but also being the fact that he's not a cardboard cutout. These are three-dimensional characters. They're full flesh and blood characters, and that's what we could attribute it to. So yes. Sandra Fuss.
Okay, I have a comment, and so does my husband. First of all, I love the movie, and I loved Grandpa. I thought he was absolutely amazing. I found it interesting how this terror of a little boy in Paris suddenly does a 180 when he gets to the farm. I expected something to happen there, but he didn't. He seemed to know. It was interesting. I was sort of surprised that he had that personality change too. Anyways, my husband also has a comment.
Sure.
Yeah, I found, now I'm not sure when he was in Paris, when he was being bullied, if they knew he was being bullied because he was Jewish, but it occurred again when he was in the countryside where they didn't know he was Jewish, and again he was being bullied. So it's I found it interesting, and I'm not sure if it was just because he was a slight young kid and
A newbie.
and somebody who looked or seemed a little different, but I found that an interesting aspect of the situation.
Yeah, well, he was being seen as different because he came from Paris. He was, there is that bias too. It's another wrinkle is, we don't
Right.
like you, they don't know that he's Jewish, but they know they don't like him because he's from Paris.
Paris.
It's a different part of the world to them. He is another, in essence, to that aspect,
Yes.
So yes, it's and again, it is this fine line. The reason, Sandra, that he begins to act differently when he gets to the farm is because, as his father said to him at the beginning, and as Susan Pauls brought up, I think it was Susan, about the fact that he had to be, his father was treating him one way, and he wasn't spoon feeding him. He was saying, grow up, you got to be a big man now. And I think that got through to him. We don't have to see that transformation. We see it by his behavior, that there's a little thing in the back of his head, that warning, of what he has to be, but he does it in his own way. He does it in his own way. And I think that's, how he goads Pepe into certain things, into looking in the mirror, into looking at himself, and not even seeing who he is. He looks in the mirror, he says, looking at his nose and everything else, but he doesn't really see who he is. What he's doing. And I love those moments, because to me, I'm reflecting, the guy's looking in the mirror, he still doesn't know who he is.
But it's very subtle how he pointed out his obvious prejudice, his big nose, his big ears, his flat face, his like all the things that Pepe is, So a lovely film.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Ellen Levitt?
Okay, hi. I was
Hi.
disappointed that Pepe didn't have a conflict with his prejudice. I would have liked to see how he would resolve the conflict between loving a Jewish boy and all his prejudice that was totally unfounded. He didn't even say why he had this prejudice. It was just this. Now, I do have to say my mother was in that same situation during World War II. She and her brother were in hiding in Poland. And yes, children had to be very, very clever to hide their Jewishness to survive. So what would Pepe have done if he found out this boy was Jewish? Would he turn him in? Would he still love him? That was a big problem for Christian people who are hiding children, because people did know those children were Jewish. That all of a sudden this child appears on the farm out of nowhere. They didn't ask my mother, are you Jewish? Are you not? What are you doing here? Everybody knew what they were doing there. They were running away from the city. So
they knew. Pepe had no idea. He just think he was sheltering a child from the city. And it's yes, you can ask that question. One might want to believe, because of the love that developed between the two of them, if at some point he found out he was Jewish, he would say to him, don't say anything, just stay here on the farm and don't go anywhere. One would hope, we don't know, we can't go to that place. We can only know what happened, what we see. And what we see is a tremendous amount of love from Pepe for this little boy. That's really his transformation, is this love. And we see it in the end when he's leaving, but it's and not something that has a finite answer, that will he all of a sudden, cast off his anti-Semitism. No, I don't think so. I think he believes what he believes, and he believes this young boy was not Jewish, and therefore he'll go on with his life and have a sad, have a sad memory of a little boy that he loved, staying with him for a while. That's where I think the film goes for me. So, I understand what you're talking about, and that's a totally different situation from Claude Berry's. Each one is personal. Each one has a story, and that's the beauty of these films. Is I can't tell you 6 million stories. I can't tell you hundreds of thousands of stories from France, but I can tell you one story which is emblematic of somebody and somebody's experience. And I think that's the importance of cinema in this case. Sandra Lefkowitz?
Larry.
It's Larry.
Oh, Larry. Okay, Larry.
It was very interesting. This was a conversation between the director and his audience.
Yes.
And casting Pepe as the character he was made it possible for a wide audience to relate to something very unattractive and to deal with it by making him the character, Pepe, the character that he was. It wouldn't have worked any other way as a message, and I think the message is very important.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I mean, he crafted this character, or although some of it could come from memory. I mean, no, it doesn't come from memory because he was with a family that knew he was Jewish. I mean, that was a different story. He created a story, though, the way, and he did craft it to make him appealing to the audience. And at the same time, point out this human flaw and how silly and absurd it is. He's pointing out an absurdity to the audience without banging us over the head, or at least banging the French audience over the head. It's not didactic. I'm not here to teach you a lesson. I'm here to show you a story, and maybe you'll derive something from it. So yes, I agree with you there. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Larry. Susan, Pauls?
Sorry to butt in again, but something just occurred to me that the relationship between the farmer, his wife, his son, and his wife were so sexual and so loving and so fun-loving that it helped to create, I think, a feeling among a French audience that would watch this, that French people away from the politics are really pretty wonderful. Because the picnics and the food and everything was so beautiful and so loving.
Yeah, I mean, that adds to the previous comment. I mean, it shows these people as human beings. That's the point. It shows them, for us, an American audience looking at a film, what is it, over 50 years later, looking at this film and seeing that and saying they're human beings. And how could, the question comes up, how could Pepe have the feelings he does? Because as Berry said, he was probably infected with this as a child, so he never changed. He never met anybody to make him change. He never had a thought about it. So you're saying, yes, but he's human. He still does picnic. He still loves his family.
And he would love to
loves
play
his dog.
doctor. He'd love to play doctor as much as he could.
Yes. Terrific. Thank you, Susan. Barbara Tate.
Barbara, unmute.
Yeah, you got to unmute Barbara. There you go.
I love the film. I had a slight reminiscence of the film of Louis Malle. Au revoir. It reminded me of that. But I wanted to point out, people have always, in horrible situations, tried to send their children to the country. They did it in London during the Blitz. They sent them here from Cuba.
Right, Peter Pan.
Yes. They sent them in the candid transports. It's, we've seen this played out. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I will recommend the film. I did earlier today, which is called The Children's Train.
Oh, that's.
It's on Netflix. It's a really well done film about a little known, and it is little known because it was interesting because I had Italians in the audience that said when they saw this film, they had to go back to to read the history because they never knew about it. And when you see the film, it is an interesting part of history in Italy post World War II. It was about families that, because after World War II, the famine, the poverty, the elements, how it affected families, killing off a lot of people. It was the Communist Party in Italy, and I'm not going to get into the history of the difference between the communists in Italy and those in Moscow, but how the Communist Party in Italy devised a plan to have kids sent from the South, even from outside of Milan, to Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, to the north, with families that would have them. So it's the same situation. And it's a wonderful evocation of that period, and wonderful acting too, I will tell you. So, and production design and music. If you want to see that film, it's dramatic, it's humorous, also very well done. So it's called The Children's Train on Netflix. So did you have anything else, Barbara? I'm sorry.
No, just that, the brief, thoughts about the Louis Malle movie and
Yeah, the
and the
references.
children, when there was something different about this child.
Yeah, there's a contrast. It shows the contrast, and it's interesting that you do bring it up, and I'm glad you did, is because that was Louis Malle's experience.
Yes.
As a kid. Same thing, different experience. I mean, Louis Malle wasn't Jewish, but he had to deal with that situation, and this is what he remembered and what happened.
A much sadder film.
Yes, much.
The end of that film is just,
oh, it's devastating.
Wrenching.
Yeah, it's devastating. Yes, thank you. Sandra Lefkowitz.
There's a film it's not about a child, it's about a grown-up, but the child went to a convent instead of to a family, and was raised and became a nun. The name of the film is Ida.
Yes.
I did.
Yes.
And
Wait,
if people haven't seen the film, it's completely different from the two films you've
Fabulous.
discussed.
yeah, we've done the
However-
film here, by the way, Sandra.
What?
We did the film in
Okay,
this program.
because-
Yeah.
Because I think that the whole issue of children being sent away is a really critical, it's a critical issue to think about, because what does happen to these children? In the case of the two films, or this film particularly, you see the boy going back and it's a wonderful relationship and life is good. But if you did Ida, you know that the result is quite different. And
Very different and understandably
and
different.
very understandable, but very not confusing, but it just lends another complexity to the way we all are wired.
Well, not only that, a complexity to what we think we understand, and emotionally what we want to see and don't get, because we have to deal with the truth. This is the element of these films, is to deliver a truth.
And by the way, I really do like the idea that you've chosen to do two films in two different generations, because if we're watching film today, a lot of the film today really, for my generation, I feel, puts us in a very different place than it does the young people. And the films are addressing what I would call the younger generation's issues more than our issues. And I think that it's really important for us to, I wish we could spread some of this kind of thinking to the younger generation, because they are missing out on some of the substance of our history, which so easily can be given to them through film.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And all I could say in answer to that is you all out there have children and probably grandchildren, and invite them in. Invite them in. Tell them, look, you have nothing to lose except seeing a film and coming and having the conversation about that film. And if they heard your reflections and your thoughts, and I think, A, it would bring them closer to you, and B, be revelatory to them. So I invite you to do those kinds of things. I mean, recently I changed my buzzword, so to speak, to, with every film, every film is a journey, to it's not just film, it's conversation. And I think we have to understand that. And that's what you all prove here, is that, to watch a movie or a film is one thing, but to have the conversation enriches you more, enriches all of us more. So thank you for saying that, and I appreciate it, and I think it is important for them to see these films. Well, they're starting to adjust to subtitles because of Netflix and Amazon. So maybe, hopefully they don't click on the dubbing of some of these foreign language films. But so if they're adjusting to subtitles, maybe it'll be easier to get them into some of these older films, and as you say, and reveal a little bit about our own generation, which is also why I recommend for us, for you to see, if you haven't seen it yet, The Brutalist. A film like The Brutalist. It's an important film. I think it's an important film. So, any more? Thank you, Wendy. Any more comments in there? Barbara, did you have something, or did I just leave your hand up? Is that?
You just left it up.
Okay, I just took it down. Thank you. Thank you. Well, if there's no one else, okay, so next month we begin with the first film is the contemporary film, and we're in Japan next month, and the film is entitled Still Walking, and it is by one of contemporary cinemas, and I don't mean Japanese cinema, but one of international cinema's great directors, Hirokazu Koreeda. It's a name you should know because some of you have seen one or two of his films here before, namely like Father Like Son was his film. Anyway, in this one, he comes to this beautifully crafted drama revealing the complex dynamics of an ultimately loving family with humor and warmth. On the anniversary of the loss of a loved one, the grown children, visit the quaint home of their parents and with their respective families in tow, naturally. And over the course of one beautiful day, new relatives become acquainted, old wounds surface, and new bonds are formed. The idea sounds familiar, but the way it's played out is absolutely beautiful. So that's the film you'll be seeing. It's on Kanopy and several other platforms, and I will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you have 2 weeks to watch the film, and maybe watch it several times. So I will look forward to seeing you then. If there's no further comments, questions, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Shelley.
Thank you.
France
Thank you.
is wonderful.
Thank
and I'm
you
sure
so
Japan
much.
will be too.
Thank you. It was a
Thank
wonderful
you.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So long.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye. See you Sunday.
Bye.
Everybody see you Sunday, right? Thanks, Linda.